Good afternoon. It's our pleasure to present What Borders Mean in Communities, Faith in Action for this 2022 Alumni Annual Weekend. On January 8th through 16th of 2022, 9 students and 2 administrators from the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary traveled to the US-Mexico border. Our mission trip was hosted by a faith-based group, Frontera de Cristo, which is located in Agua Prieta, Mexico. Today's panel is to share some of the images, to talk about some of the experiences, and in hopes that you will be able to apply this material, this information towards your understanding of what is going on in immigration and migration on the US-Mexican border. We thank you again, and we look forward to any questions, comments, feedback you may have after our video at any point. Joining me today, and my name is Ruth Boykin, is Hoka. Hoka will tell you more about herself as we begin our conversation. And Hoka is an administrator with Frontera de Cristo in Agua Prieta, Mexico. And we also are honored to have Nicole. Nicole is a seminary student who I believe showed great insight and heart during our mission trip. And the 3 of us would like to again share images, content, and hopefully some inspiration about application of our knowledge that we learned about migration. So to begin our conversation, let's start with Hoka, and Hoka being the representative and our host at the trip. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you want to see happen during these kinds of visits and some of Frontera de Cristo's priorities and strategies.
Hello, everyone. So again, my name is Jocabed Gallegos. I'm one of the coordinators of Frontera de Cristo. And one of the things that we love when delegations come to Frontera de Cristo, it is because there is something inside you that is calling you to be present on the border or to know about realities that are happening on border land. So normally we can have a lot of what media has to tell us. And we believe a lot of what the media says. There is danger on the borders, there is bad people there are different issues that can harm. But we, very few times we focus on what the realities of the life on the border is. So when we come to the border, when we live on the border, we can see that a border is a different world. It is, for me and in the Ministry of Frontera de Cristo, we can see like 2 worlds coming together and making a new one and bringing life and joy, but also gave us the opportunity to share that there's still struggles and opportunities to change into life, and but also doing a lot of partnership. So when delegations come, like PTS, it was a lovely week that we spent together. It is just seeing, like, being able to experience what we live every day. How people, it likes to be encouraged, likes to be a hug, even in this time of COVID.
Yes,
but you're not always hug with your arms. You can hug with your eyes, with your laugh, and with your presence. So that's one of the important things. And like the different situations that people it is living on this area. So it is important for us just to know how life can be developed and how the borders are a place of encounter, a place of changing, a place that can take your hearts beyond what just you can see or expect. And So we have a lot of different partnerships as Frontera de Cristo. We as Frontera de Cristo do nothing by ourselves. Like one time someone asked us what Frontera de Cristo does. And my partner, Mark Adams, and I, we see each other and he says, well, we do nothing. But we do not do nothing only by Frontera de Cristo, by ourselves. We do a lot of things in partnership. We have partnership with different organizations that are working in different aspects on the life of the border. We have partners with a drug rehabilitation center, CAPSIC. And you may say, what a drug rehabilitation center can do like in a borderland or talking about migration. Well, a lot of people knows that border is also a place where there's a lot of different illegal crossing, but not always people. Like there is illegal crossing by drugs. And there is people that is being trapped on that on that path. But there's also the reality is that they need to get out of the how you say the
clutch or
the culture
The
of the drug.
clutch. Yeah, the
Uh-huh,
clutch of the drug.
the clutch of the and they want to do something different. So when we will start doing partnership with CAPSIC, this drug rehabilitation center, it was like we can show Christ in the life of them, but also they want to do a change in their life, giving back some of giving back life in some of the harm that they've been doing. So they accepted a program that was Water for Life.
That's right. I think that's a wonderful way to start, Hoka. Thank you, because we want to have our alumni know about the various ways that they can get involved. And you just pointed out there are a number of potential partnerships and areas where faith-based organizations and individuals can support what goes on at the border, regardless what their beliefs might be once they become more informed. I'm going to turn to Nicole, and I want to just say for a moment that this program is sponsored by WMI, World Mission Institute, which is an academic institute at the seminary. And there are two goals. As I mentioned earlier, these mission trips are designed to highlight faith-based responses to various issues around the globe. After COVID, we returned and it was the Mexico-American border was closed. And secondly, to develop intercultural competence. The seminary realizes that graduates of the seminary need to be informed and developed in this aspect in whatever avenues their ministries might take them. So with that said, Hoka's setting the groundwork about the various partnerships and my sharing about the mission of WMI. Nicole, would you like to share what you learned or some of your experiences as a student and how that impacted you?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm Nicole Skilder. I'm a second year full-time seminary student. And I, as Hoka was talking, I was reminded that a lot of this, that felt like true to my experience before coming on this trip. I felt I didn't know what was really happening on the border because the news of what was happening there had become so politicized. And as well, mission, the concept of mission had become so politicized, at least in the popular kind of culture or consciousness around these issues. So I really came in with an open heart without a lot of information. Usually students, just to give a bit of background, they do a missiology course and then they often go on the trip after they take that course, but I took it out of sequence. And I'm actually taking the course now, so it's helping me process after the fact. But I'm glad that I did that in retrospect because I was able to go in again with kind of an open mind and heart around these issues. so yeah, I'm still, and I've talked to other peers about this. We feel like we're going to be kind of processing and learning and growing from what occurred there that week with our friends and partners on the border, our hosts, for the rest of our lives, potentially. It was we were told by Dr. Farrell and others before we went that this would be a life-changing experience, and I can testify to the fact that was true for me. So yeah, I think I really witnessed faith in action there in a way that isn't really possible inside the walls, so to speak. Now we're all online, but the walls of the seminary. And yeah, now that I'm starting to put names to theologies and ways of thinking about that, that's a different kind of layer or framework on top of it. But in terms of the experience itself, I was just so in awe of the way that you are living out the Christian faith in action there. So yeah, that was my experience in kind of a nutshell.
And I'm glad that you brought up the course, Nicole, because it illustrates how important it is that we do some learning. And I remember Hoka as a co-leader, we met with you and Mark beforehand, and some folks were saying, well, should we bring some donations or gifts or, and Nicole, as you pointed out, some of us have this idea of what mission means. And Hoka, I will never forget this. You said, don't bring anything, just bring yourselves and seek to understand. And that was so insightful. And I hope from our presentation today that this will stimulate some of the audience to start reading and start just wanting to become informed. I know that when we talk about being informed, one of the themes that came up in the course and during our trip was individualism versus collectivism. So we're going to be, we don't want to be too academic, but I thought it might be helpful to put some themes out there so that folks who are maybe considering doing mission work with a group like Frontera de Cristo think about some of the elements of what that would mean. So do either of you have any thoughts on the individualism versus collectivism of the society that we explored?
I could start. Do you want to start, Hoka, or should I?
No, go ahead.
Well, I think a lot of us found ourselves really reflecting, no society or culture is perfect. And I think as Christians, we're called to find Christ in the culture and to enact that in the culture in a way that challenges the status quo. And obviously that's much easier to say than to do. But I think a lot of us were in a lot of pain, honestly, while we were there, just processing some of the sins of our own culture in terms of the individualism, in terms of the isolating nature of I'm going to take care of me and my own, and how that really separates us from each other. Obviously, we are all called to go to church and to be parts of churches where we're doing faithful, we're living out, faithful actions within our community. But I think in terms of what we experienced during the mission trip, we met all of the partnerships the Frontera de Cristo had, which Hoka already spoke to, has cultivated and cared for. And yeah, you cannot do it alone is what you end up seeing. You really need so many people, and that's what the body of Christ really is. So yeah, I think a lot of us, I can only speak for myself, but it did feel like we were processing why our culture is so individualistic, like what is that, and what is the goal, and is obviously we need to be called out of that in order to follow Christ faithfully. So yeah, those are some of my initial reflections.
Yes.
That's it. Hoka, you wanted to say something?
Yes, and one of the things that we've really been happening, like the Mexican culture is very commune. Like we always like to be on family together. And one of the things that we're being learning is also how growing together with all those different challenges, because living together with a lot of people and more than being individualist brings different challenges in how to deal with one and another. That's one of the main things. And I was just thinking in one of the passage, the main passage for Frontera de Cristo and for the different border ministries is in Ephesians 2:11-22. And there is this part where it says, God calls you that were far away and calls those that are close to come together and to bring peace and to show the peace and break all those walls of division that were between one of us or one another. And so that is when we're like talking like, how far are you? How close are you? So come together. And that's a call of Jesus for us, working together and living together, experiencing together. We know that maybe when things change, we're going to be in different areas or parts, but we still being together in working and in exchange. Now, like the delegation, the PTS, like everyone is in their own sites, in their own places, but with the same heart that unite us. And that is living in collectivity and not only in individualism.
I love that point has come up. I know from my end, I saw love and working together when we were visiting the various partnership sites. And one of the things that stood out for me, we attended a church service. We had lunch at one of the ministers' homes, and there was a person that cooked our breakfast every day, and she brought her daughter. So what we say is from the smallest unit to the largest, the groups were so kind and loving to us in spite of some harsh experiences that they were having. And that's the point I'd like to make, that one of the areas we visited was the center where you provide migrant services to people who are in transition. Maybe they've been deported or they're just in kind of a holding pattern until they decide where they're going to go. And I must say, I never heard bitterness. I only heard thoughts of encouragement. You know, people had emotions about what they were going through, but I just heard again that there was hope and encouragement. And I think maybe that's because of what Frontera de Cristo, but I felt it in the heart. And practically everywhere we went, I saw people just working together, whether it was making handicrafts or providing food and services. Everybody was working to help the other, to pull someone along. And we often say that in American society, but often we talk about the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. That philosophy isn't always played out. And as both of you have said, as people who profess a faith, we might benefit from really looking and examining where we help others collectively to become a part of a group that's coming together from the heart. And I thank you for quoting that scripture, Hoka, because that leads me to another point, and that is about theology. You know, the seminary, that's the heart of what we do. And do either of you have any thoughts? I know, Nicole, you've mentioned that you are starting just now to think more about the theology of the experience. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was curious to, at this point out from the trip to sort of ask Hoka and more in depth what her seminary experience was like in terms of learning about these different theologies. We're learning now about obviously the theology of liberation, which originated in Latin America, and the theology of struggle in the Philippines, and sort of these ideas of a theology from below that comes actually from the experience of people on the ground, and came from clergy speaking to those folks who are doing the work like Frontera de Cristo is doing, and that's where the theology emerges from. So yeah, I wanted to ask if Hoka had any frameworks that emerged from your experience in seminary or beyond, or if you feel like, I guess right now I'm sort of in a place of, should the scripture guide me or should the scholarship guide me, and trying to kind of put those two together. It's tough sometimes to see where the Spirit is leading and balance those two sort of frameworks, if that makes sense. So I wanted to sort of ask that open-ended question.
Oh, thank you. And in fact, it is kind of interesting about, because the seminary where I went is the Presbyterian Seminary in Mexico City.
That's
and
right.
one of the things, that was happening on my time, it was like, there was people saying, "Oh no, the seminary is too liberal," and in my time, I started doing a lot of different changes, and like, okay, you're not going to see like liberation theology, you're not going to see and different aspects of how like working or doing things together. And it was one quote that a professor normally says, you can hear to be pastor, so you need to smell like sheep and not to theology. And that was kind of the so it was lots of different pressure. In other part, I was a woman. And as a woman, in the Presbyterian Church in Mexico, they do not ordain women. And when I was introducing myself to like what I went to study, I say that I want to be an ordained pastor, and that was like kind of crazy thing for a lot of the professors and students there. There were some that were like welcome and fine, and there were others that were kind of really rush. And so it was during my time of seminary, it was that struggles and in and out, like I don't know how it can be like. But one of the things that I was able to experience, there were some professors that say, "Okay, you need to read those books and just take the idea what's going on. We can talk about it, and we can work together in different aspects of the life and church and how to be involved in community." They didn't go deeply in what like the theology, and so for me it was more experimental, living out the theology. And what I found in my growing, it was my dad, he was a pastor. And he was one of the pastors that was more liberal in our area, in our community, in the presbytery. So he always say, and that was the experience, like, if you're studying something, you need to live it out. And if you're like, you need to see how God is guiding you to do different changes in your life and be present with the community. Like, because you can have all the theology that you study on seminary over here. But if you don't put that on the church level, on the people level, on not only people that comes from church, but the people that is outside, and you cannot have a talk together. So it is like just being outside or aware, not aware what is going on in the community.
So I love that part. And it makes me think there was another scripture that we often turn to, and I think it was Mark 4, "Who is my brother?" Was that Mark 4? Do you remember that, Hoka? But at some point we talked about who is my brother. And when you talk about these, this heart of working with people, in this instance, in the immigration community, it's about the churched and the unchurched that we try to reach out to. So we'll go back to our question about the relationship between faith and context. And I think, Hoka, you were talking about how important it is to, I think you said, come out of our heads and come out with our hearts in relating to the churched and the unchurched in terms of what their needs might be. And it made me think of this notion of the relationship between faith and context. Nicole, you had mentioned in some of your writings about how do we establish healthy boundaries. I think this is a really critical point about faith, people who express faith, and how can they look at the blind sides they might have, or maybe we'll do it positively. How can they construct healthy relationships with folks? And when they're trying to express their faith in a certain context where they might be inclined to be more donating, charity, etc. So I'm kind of opening that up to the two of you. Healthy boundaries within this context of expressing our faith.
Yeah, well, I think, these are, I'm already very uplifted by this conversation, and just reflecting back on the scriptures that were so influential during that week, Ephesians, which we came right in the first day, we went right to the wall as soon as we woke up before we went to church, and we touched the wall and we prayed together at the wall. And we read that Ephesians scripture, and just this idea of being joined together into the temple. It was just, that's so radical, actually, if you really think about it. But, and again, since I didn't have a lot of frameworks kind of before I went on the trip, I found I was kind of coming up with a lot of just sort of very simple metaphors to try to explain my experience. And one of them was sort of this idea of boundaries versus borders, and constructing healthy relationships, because, during this time, I think a lot of us, you hear a lot about like prayers for peace, and peace has already come up. How do we live peacefully in community? And I think it really starts from within, and how do I live peaceably with my neighbor? So yeah, those are sort of the things that were on my mind, and the way that I actually saw that being lived out faithfully and peacefully. I mean, there was just such an air of peace wherever we went. And this feeling that people were cooperating regardless of circumstances. And I just, I was really inspired by that. And I think everything that Hoka said about, you don't necessarily, that theology should lead you, but you have to live it out and faithfully. So yeah, that really checks out with all of my experiences, and even conversations that we had with Pastor Ramon about, I'm really uplifted by the fact that it seems like in coming out of the seminaries in Mexico that folks are really called to be pastors. Here I'm finding, there's a lot of ambiguity in terms of an ambivalence, I should say, for folks my age about becoming pastors. There's a lot of feeling of like the secularization has just kind of gotten to a point where we can't see ourselves in these roles as much. And for me, this trip was really influential in terms of like, no, I could do that. I could really be that and live that out. So those are sort of my disjointed thoughts on that. But I think context is so important. And what's strange about a mission trip, I'm finding, is that it actually calls you to explore your context just as much as that context. You're sort of, you're called to see where am I, where can I serve within my own context faithfully, rather than like just applying exactly what you learned, if that makes sense, to the new context.
Excellent. Yeah. It's an excellent point. Do you want to add to that, Hoka? Faith and context?
Yeah, so one of the last things that I think it is important for Frontera de Cristo, because here at the border, we can see a physical wall of division. Mm. But a lot of times when we're in different places where we live, or we don't see walls, we think that everything is fine, but we don't focus in the walls that we put in our hearts and our minds and in what we do. And the idea is also be aware of what things am I doing, Maybe it was something that I was growing up, and I started just putting a wall, a not visible wall between me and the other one. So, so how now you live your daily life and your different situations, just seeing how God is being broken the walls of the vision. And that's one of the important things, like how do you really see like the call of God in your life to keep going on, and the difference, like now there is another passage of Mark that is like really really good for me to say this. And it was when Jesus when a blind man come to Jesus, and Jesus, when asking what he wants to do and he wants to see, Jesus spit on his eyes.
Mm.
And it doesn't say like there's another blind man when he make mud and put in the eyes, but in this guy it says spit on his eyes. He take it out of town and then spit on his eyes. And that was like kind of like I sometimes I need to be out of my zone of comfort. And then Jesus spit on my eyes.
Mm.
It's not, maybe it's not going to be something easy for me. It's not going to be nice feeling. Maybe I can feel really insult what he's been doing, or I maybe starting realizing who am I in order to be with the other. And then Jesus say, like later say, like, what do you see? And he says, I see people like moving trees. So he realized that he has to be true what the things that he is able to experience. I don't see clearly what's going on. And then he says that Jesus touched his eyes and he was able to see everything clearly. So we have to live a different process in our lives in order to be able to see. Maybe right now we're on the speeding time because we still don't know and we don't understand. But how we're going to say, this is the way that I see.
Right.
So now I have a privilege that I need to share with others in compassion and love.
Okay, that was powerful.
Yeah.
It was powerful. And I think that's a fitting place for us to wrap up our conversation with that question about our eyes being opened and what do we see. And I'd like to, first of all, thank the two of you. As Nicole mentioned, every time we discuss this trip now and probably for the rest of our lives, we're going to see more learnings and growing and deepening of our spirit and understanding. And today, I hope for our audience that this allows you to look at what you might do in terms of a faith-based organization you're involved in, or as an individual to be a part of helping others that you will see. Frontera de Cristo has a number of immersion experiences. Their website will be shown later in this recording. We ask you to take note and reach out to them if you found this to be of interest. And the seminary is going to continue with our World Mission Institutes. I understand next year there are 3 trips planned, and you can reach out to them to find out more about their locations. But for today, for the Alumni Weekend, we'd like to thank our audience for your interest. And please feel free to reach out to any of us about this recording. If you'd like more information, we'll be happy to direct you in whatever way we might go. We are looking forward to being more involved. And thank you again for your interest and your time.